my possession, and I've never shown it to anybody except my wife. But it's interesting to look through it. And there's probably one in the archives. I can't imagine this being the only copy. I'm sure there's one in the National Archives with all the rest of the stuff. Those fellows that type real slowly, or whatever they call those stenotypists, they had one of those guys in there, with those things, and that's where it came from.
Oh, thank God they did that.
Transcript of that press conference.
You know what? The only thing that I've read that they make a big deal about is they quote you in the newspaper as saying that it was a wound of entrance.
What I said was, and I did say it looked like an entrance wound. What I said was, the wound in the neck was small, like an entrance wound. I did say that. Now, I wish I hadn't now because everybody took it out of context, but I did say that. It was small, like an entrance wound.
Yeah.
I recognize, as I said earlier, I was in a big hurry. He had agony of inspiration. I didn't even wipe the blood off. As soon as I saw we were in trouble with the breathing, I did a trach. And I got right through that wound and nobody else ever saw it. And I made it big enough to do the trach and to handle bleeding that was coming out. So it was big enough to do a little operation on if I had to. And I did say that, and I followed that sentence by saying, but neither Dr. Clark nor I know how many bullets there were or where they came from.
Right.
Everybody conveniently left that out. The qualifying phrase. They all left that out. And all they took out of that thing was Dr. Perry said it was an entrance wound. I didn't say it was an entrance wound. I said it looked small, like an entrance wound.
It looked like.
And they took it out of context. I qualified it by saying I did not know, but they conveniently decided they wouldn't quote that. And that's in that typescript.
In a trach incision.
But see, at the time it offended me that people said that I first said it looked like an entrance wound and changed my mind. No, I didn't. I never changed my mind. It did look small like an entrance wound, but it wasn't.
It wasn't.
I didn't measure it, and it wasn't. And I didn't know about the wounds in the back at the time. I was in a big hurry. I didn't find out about those till the next morning. You people believe you don't need to. So it's all over as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not going to bring a transcript out, nor am I going to talk about it again. I see no reason to.
Is a trach incision just like a quarter inch or something, or?
No.
It's bigger.
The ostomy incision has to be big enough to put a big old tube in the trachea, but I made this bigger than a tracheostomy incision because I was bleeding from it. I made it big enough to do what someone said, how big was it? I mean, who knows? I made it big enough.
That's why. See, they try to make a big deal out of the wound.
People who don't know anything about the business.
Wow.
Somebody who knows something about this business would make a big deal about it. The amateurs, they'll say something, but what do they know? I mean, they've never been there. When you're there, you get the incision big enough to control the airway and to control the bleeding. That's what I did.
Right.
And I didn't measure it. I didn't wipe the blood off. I didn't fiddle with it. I was in a hurry. And I made it big enough, and I put a big old metal tracheostomy tube in there with a flange on it, too, like we used to have in the old days. Now we have much smaller modern stuff. But what we used in 1963 was a big old metal flange which further disturbed the tissues. And anyone that's experienced in this business wouldn't give all that a second thought. Wow. Only all these conspirators and amateurs who have opinions about something they know nothing about. Right. And that's what happened. But see, it doesn't do any good to tell them. They've already been told and they didn't believe it the first time around, so why should I bother now?
I
intended to make money, all these books and stuff, and movies. Hey, they don't really care about it. I got to go to work. It's nice to talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Perry.
Sorry to Elizabeth. I hope she gets better.
Yeah, I'll tell her.
Good luck.
How could you do that to Bobby and JFK? You took freedom and you threw it right away. And what you did to Martin,
Okay, we're here with Mrs. Worrell, and we certainly appreciate your time in doing this interview. And Mrs. Worrell, your son was James Richard Worrell.
That's right. Called him Dickie.
That was his nickname.
Dickie, right.
And in 1963, how long had you lived here in Dallas?
Oh, probably 5 years.
And on November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy decided to come to town, your son had decided to go see him.
That's right.
And he was going to high school at the time?
Yes.
And what high school did he go to?
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And he decided to take off school, or did
That's
they let
right.
him off? Or?
He skipped school. He skipped school.
And I believe that he decided to go to Love Field, is
He
that
did.
correct?
He saw him first at Love Field, and then he got on the bus and went downtown.
And did he say exactly what his position was when he arrived downtown, where he was standing at? Or?
He said he was standing right below the window where supposedly the gun was.
And how old did you say he was on November?
He'd be 20.
20 years old?
Mhm.
And after everything was over with, at what time that day did you actually speak with him?
Oh, it was after I got home from work, and he told me what had happened and what he'd seen, and I can't remember now if we had friends over or what, but we discussed it, and they said we should report it to the Farmers Branch Police, and I think we did talk to someone, and they said that I think they referred him then to the FBI or someone downtown.
There was a picture that they described him in the Warren report. Could you hold that up and identify him?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay, thank you very much. And when he came home that day, did he tell you everything that had happened and what he saw?
Oh, yes, he was very excited about it, that he had seen him. And then the strange thing was that after Kennedy left the airport, his motorcade came right by our office, and we stood in the street, and I could have reached out and touched Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. No, it was Conley.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then
And-
it was right after that that we'd heard he was killed.
You worked in that area?
Uh-huh. I worked on Cedar Springs.
On Cedar Springs?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one of the
Yeah,
first couple
it was on the
streets.
route.
And to the best of your to your knowledge, when he came home that day, what were some of the things that he explained to you that he saw and heard?
Oh, he just mentioned that he had heard 4 shots, and it scared him. He thought at first it was firecrackers, and then he decided, well, it was something more than that. And then I think that's when he said he ran and went to the back of the building, and then that's where he told me he saw someone come out of the building. Yeah.
And later he did testify to the Warren Commission?
Yes, yeah.
And did he also testify to the FBI?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think so. Not to my knowledge.
When he went to Washington, do you recall about what time that was that he went to Washington?
I don't recall now. It's been so long ago. But I know he went with, what was it? He was either a news reporter or a photographer from one of the papers. And he said that was a wonderful experience to see Washington, D.C.
This is his Warren Commission testimony that I just thought I'd show you. You were kind enough to autograph that for me earlier, where he did say that he thought he heard a 4th shot and that he saw this man run around the back of the school book depository. To the best of your recollection, does that appear to be exactly what he said?
That's what he told me. Yes.
And then after that, were you contacted by any newspapers or?
Oh, he got some letters from some man in Louisiana that wanted something, but it was several years later. In fact, One of the letters that he got was after he'd been killed in this motorcycle accident.
From Jim Garrison.
I believe that was his name, but I don't really recall.
And did you say that that someone from the FBI came and got the letters, or that you gave them to them? Or?
Seemed like I mailed them to somebody. I'm not sure. I mean, this was after Dickie had been killed, which was 3 years later. And I was so upset with that I didn't really pay too much attention to all this.
Did the FBI ever come out here to talk to him?
No, not to my knowledge.
So
No.
you probably didn't receive a lot of phone calls from the FBI or anything?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
And do you know if he ever interviewed with anyone on a network or?
Oh, no.
No?
No, except I think you saw the newspaper where one of the newspapers was out here. And
They seem to accurately report what
Yeah.
you told the Warren Commission.
and talked to him while I was at work.
I see. And what year did you say he died?
1966,
And was it in November?
November 5th.
November 5th? And it was on a motorcycle accident?
Motorcycle accident.
And he was with his girlfriend?
It was a girlfriend.
Girlfriend. And was it a case where he had an accident, or was it something where somebody hit him?
The police couldn't really tell me. They said that witnesses said that he wasn't speeding or being reckless or anything. They thought maybe he hit an oil slick or something. And he hit, he flipped, I guess, and he hit the front end of a car, and I'm sure was killed instantly. And his girlfriend, or the girlfriend, was thrown off too, and she died a few hours later than he did.
And did he go to any of the hospitals around here, or was it in Farmers Branch or
Oh, they took him to Parkland.
Parkland? And then he was buried in Farmers Branch?
Yes, right down here on Webb Chapel.
And you said earlier that that they either didn't ask you if you wanted to close back, or they...
Never did even mention it. Never did even mention it. The only thing I got was at the hospital when they told me that he was dead. The policeman gave me his wallet,
They gave him his wallet.
and that's all I ever got.
Did you get a report of an actual policeman report of what had happened? Or?
I don't recall a written one. I think I did call somebody, and they told me who the motorcycle belonged to, because it wasn't Dickie's.
Did you ever contact any of the witnesses, or that saw that accident, or did they contact you or anything?
No.
Did they give you a record of who the witnesses were? Or?
No.
No. And they had, of course, a death certificate, but they did not do an autopsy.
No.
No.
No, they said he hit the curb and was killed instantly, which was a blessing.
And you said that earlier. Did you say that? I think you told Susan that he thought that he felt that he might not live past a certain age. That he.
Oh, he did. I'd come home from work and he'd be sitting here reading the Bible, and I'd mentioned to him one time that he better be thinking about his future, because he was getting at the age. I said, "You probably marry and have children." He said, "Mother, don't worry about it." He said, "I'll never live to be 28 years old." And he was 23 when he died.
And besides testifying to the Warren Commission, and I think you said you contacted the FBI, basically there wasn't any other contact after that. Is that correct?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Would you like to see those letters returned to you from the FBI that they have? If we can get those back for you?
I wouldn't even know what they were. I mean, like I say, it's been so long ago. But I did. Yeah, I'm sure I sent them to the Dallas office. I just don't remember. Yeah. Do you suppose they would have them?
Oh, absolutely.
Would they?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we were going to prepare a letter where you would request that information and any other type of records they might have to be sent to you. And we could do that for you. And because it is your records, it belongs to you, they will return them to you.
Well, that'd be good. I mean,
I think you
like
should
I say,
have
it's been
those.
so long ago, I don't really recall, but I vaguely remember that there was a letter or two that I did forward.
Well, Mrs. Worrell, we thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, I appreciate you coming by.
Well, you're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, J. Edgar, the more I know about the secrets and lies we were never told, the madder I get, that no one could tell you no. You had the power, they shook when they heard your name. Too much power, no one could take away.
As such, now my wife will tell you, I've been in those clubs of his many, many times. The Silver Spur and the Bachelor's Club and all of them. And he'd put me right down in the front row every time. I never made a nickel off of him as a fee. I probably made a fee off of some of his dancing girls, candy bar, or some of those titty pushers that they throw in jail, you know, like misdemeanor, you know, for exposing such tits and all that. But I never made a nickel off of Ruby.
Do you think he might have?
Do you think that somehow Melvin Belloc got himself attached to this case against the wishes of Jack Ruby?
No, yeah, he did. He moved in the case. And that deal he pulled in a court down there, that goddamn mental syndrome bullshit he pulled.
With Ruby standing up and saying, I'm not.
It's kind of like a DNA. Yours can't understand all that crap.
Right.
You got to, like that Selena woman, they'll give her life. They don't understand how to, you know.
Are you aware that Melvin Belloc also represented Frank Regano, who was the attorney of Jimmy Hoffa in Santos Traficante, and he represented him in a libel suit against Time Magazine where they call him a member of La Cosa Nostra?
That son of a bitch on that tape there, I want to tell Pat. I told you when he was out here before, I represented Jack Casey, who owned the school of Paschall, and I represented him in November and got him acquitted. Jack Casey, he's dead now. All these people are dying on me.
Do you think Ruby supplied women to different people?
Nah, Ruby was AC/DC. He wasn't.
Really?
He was an AC/DC.
He wasn't into prostitution involved in it at all?
Well, he was, Ruby courted the police department, as you know, and the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office. That's where I got to know him, when I was at the DA's office.
But if he did favors for him, he had to do something.
Well, you know, not big. You wouldn't do it.
Sandwiches?
You know, like, it wasn't any money on the table, all that bullshit. He was just a kind of a, like you in school, that somebody always was hanging around everybody. You know, wants to be in there with everybody.
You know, his tax record showed in 1960 he made $52,000.
In 19 what?
1960.
Shit, that's a lot of money.
But then he showed a profit of $2,000.
Out of 50?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd
Oh,
he go
gross
to?
receipts, you mean? His bar did 52 grand?
His two clubs.
Where'd he go to?
Or his one club.
Where'd he go to?
That's what I mean. When he got arrested, he had $5,000 in the trunk or something like that. But then you hear policemen say he was broke all the time, so it's really
Let me
strange.
just ask you straight out, Mr. Bruner. You knew Ruby. You think he was withholding back anything that he knew?
Yeah. Yeah, all
But-
that bullshit.
But if he had ties,
What's that all bullshit they put out about him? I mean, you know, he was,
what do you think
all that
about?
crap about him being with the mafia and down in New Orleans and Castro and all that shit, Batista, whoever it was.
But he did have ties to Capone, Al Capone.
He was just a street guy from Chicago, a Jewish boy, immigrant, Russian Jewish immigrant son with about 10, 11 kids. I knew his sister Eva Grant, as well as I knew him down there, because she lived out and nursed him and all
Did you
that.
know about his relationship with Peter Marcello?
I know about that.
And he would, that's where
In
he,
New Orleans? Nah, it's about shit.
So they had some,
Goddamn Peter Marcello used to come up here in Dallas all the time. Hell, half of those police officers knew him.
right,
Personally. You know, I didn't mean nothing to Dallas. He's from New Orleans.
right,
That's another city,
right.
600 miles away. That don't mean nothing.
you know, when Castro took over and he threw Trafficani in jail, there was a reporter caught up in that dragnet, and he said that Trafficani was visited by Ruby. And that's what was kind of
That's what he
strange.
said.
Seth
Yeah.
Cantor?
No, it wasn't Seth Cantor, it was another
Did you know Seth
reporter.
Cantor? You didn't?
But no, this reporter said that Trafficani was visited by an American man named Ruby.
Seth Cantor was the one, that book that I showed you that said Ed Bruner or Fred Bruner or whatever.
Right.
That guy had a footnote and he referred to a book that Seth Cantor wrote called Who is Jack Ruby? And that's where that information came from. He was a reporter for I think the Dallas Morning News, wasn't it, Mark?
Patsy.
And lo and behold, I walk in there. There's my old buddy Vince Drain.
No
You know his
kidding.
name?
I talked to him. He's the one that
Vince
said
was
that.
with his wife Ruth.
Wow.
He getting these deals, and I started yelling, "Where's that?" This is the guy that called out of the Vince was really a kind of a fair-haired boy from Edgar Hoover. He stayed in this office 30 years and was never transferred.
Right.
That tells you how powerful he was.
That's right.
And he'd pick up Hoover at the airport and bring him in. And all this other, but he was sitting there also, was at that time, was down there on Commerce across the Mercury building, the FBI office. And he was the one that would say who did this and who did that. And I think Vince was responsible for Barrett getting transferred out because he didn't like Barrett. Vince, I think, was one.
He's the one that told me that that was buried in that picture.
Yeah.
That's what
Well,
he
Vince, have you seen him lately? When'd you see him?
I didn't see him. I only talked. Al Maddox called him.
What
'Cause
he did now?
Then he retired. But he's the one that called Vince Drain and said, "Who was that with Buddy?" And that's when Vince Drain said, "That's Robert Barrett."
What are you gonna do when all these old boys like me die?
We're gonna be the
Well,
only
we're gonna
ones
have
that
to
know.
go home.
We're gonna be the only ones that know the truth, Mr. Bridget.
That's right. That's why we come to people that were there. See, we don't write things because we think someone said.
You didn't know I was in Roe v. Wade?
I did. I
You
know
did.
all about you.
Oh, bullshit.
He
You
did.
think you do. You think you do.
I
Well,
know.
he knew you punched somebody out.
I know that you commanded a lot of
I'm good at
respect.
that, huh?
You commanded a lot of respect, and you was tough. You always been tough and straight, and that's the reputation you got. People feared you.
Who's the guy you punched out? I forgot his name.
Tom Howard.
Oh, Tom Howard. That's right. He punched Tom Howard. Tom Howard. Because he did something in
Call him a liar.
in court.
Call him a liar.
In the.
No, he said, he called me a liar. We were trying to case in front of a jury, and I said, "Don't you call me a liar." He looked at me and he said, "I'm telling you to your face, you're a damn liar."
In spite of
When
words.
he did that, I hit him. Old Joe B. Brown was the judge in county court then, before he got over it, wasn't trying Ruby. Well, Joe B. didn't have any sense either. But anyway, he gave me 3 days in jail and $250 fine. And there's a guy here named Clyde Swalwell, Doc Swalwell. He's dead now. He used to be the head of the traffic commission, you know, public service deal. He came down to my office and handed me an envelope, brown envelope like that. And I opened it up, and there was $750 in there. He said, "This will pay your fine." I said, "Well, Clyde, my fine number $250." He said, "That's all right, keep the rest of it." I said, "Wait a minute, this is tempting. I may hit somebody again." Making money out of it. You know, there's a lot of money then. $750.
Man.
Decker,
I want
if
to
he was
hear
living today, he could get more information behind the bushes than most of these detectives can get with fingerprints.
Right.
He was that kind of a guy. I was with him one time out here at the KERA TV station. He used to be a public television. He was putting on trials out there. And there's a motel right next door to it. And we got in the car, his wife was up in the front seat, and somebody whistled behind these bushes. Decker got out, and he went behind those bushes and talked to the guy for about 5 minutes. I guess I got him behind him. He got back in the car, and I said, Sheriff, who was that? He turned around to me and said, none of your goddamn business. Which it wasn't. You know, that's the way he got his information.
That's what he was.
Stool pigeon would give him all this stuff, different places all over. That's the way he'd get his information.
Did you like Derek?
Oh, great guy, great guy. One eye, he had one eye. They called him the one-eyed sheriff. They missed him. They haven't got over him yet. Well, here's his pen. Give him his pen back.
What I want to do is just make sure Patsy gets some money, a lot of money, and I'm, like I said, all I've done is just put interviews on video, like Al Maddox and Henry Wade. And
well, you know, when he sells this thing, she's going to have to put some addendums in the thing about she's going to keep certain films for her own personal use, her relatives and family. And
right.
Like
That's
that.
why we need to get a transfer to video, or of course she's got copies and all. I'll take that to her today. And but
Tell her to call me. I tell her we tried to call her to call me.
So the
She
thing
will
is,
call me anyway.
So you developed it on the night of the assassination. Barrett showed up after you called the FBI, and then he took it and gave you a receipt. He did give you a receipt.
No, he didn't take it.
He didn't. Oh, he didn't take it. He didn't take the original. He didn't even examine it. He
No.
examined it there, and then that was
Did
it.
you take
He
a
left.
copy?
No.
How did Groden get a copy of the film?
Well,
But they took it to
he
the
got
house.
the House Committee on Selective Assassination. That's where he got it.
Oh, but Barrett never had one.
Oh.
Barrett,
That document's wrong then.
Barrett didn't have a copy of this. I had it in my fist when I left out there. After
Plus two
you know right
copies?
exactly where it is, near that Manor Bakery. That's exactly where it was.
How many copies did you make that night?
One.
Just one.
Did you make other copies since?
Oh,
they gave
the
you-
House Select Committee made a couple of copies when it sent it back.
How did Patsy get her copy?
I think it's one of them.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Bruner, thank you very much for all your help.
I really.
You had the power, they shook when they heard your name.
9:21 a.m.
Hey, Mark, Brian Clary here. I got your fax this morning, and I read it. I'm terribly sorry. I may have had a misunderstanding. I didn't realize you had a signed contract with Patsy. Would you please fax me a copy of it immediately? I'd like to have that fax before noon if you get this message. Otherwise, I've been authorized to move forward with a lawsuit against you. So I'd hope for you to get that to me as soon as possible. Thank you.
Friday, 6:52 p.m.
Mark, this is Brian Clary. I'm still waiting for you to fax me that signed agreement you have with Patsy Pascall. I would strongly suggest if you have such an agreement, and I don't doubt that you do, but I strongly suggest you fax it to me immediately. I'm about to file suit on this case, and I got to know who to join and who not to. So please, if you have an agreement signed by Patsy, and witnessed by anybody, you need to send it right away. Thank you.
Okay.
Stand in the broad daylight, and I shout your name in vain. Oh. And how could you do that to Bobby and JFK? You took freedom.
Sergeant H.B. McLain of the Sheriff's Department, and we sure appreciate your time that you're giving us today. And we're also here with Steve Barber, who's done some extensive acoustical work concerning the involvement that they tried to get you involved in H.B. McLain. And we're also here with Greg James, video consultant to the Patsy Pascall film. And Sergeant McLain, when did you start for the Dallas Police Department?
1953.
And what capacity were you hired at
I was
that time?
patrolman.
Patrolman. And at what point did you switch over to the Sheriff's Department?
Oh, I switched over to the Sheriff's Department in 1981 after I retired from the city.
From the city. And of course, on November 22nd, 1963, you were working at that time.
Yes, sir.
And what was your assignment for that day?
I was in the motorcade for the president's escort.
And as you went through the downtown area, of course, we know that as you went down Main Street and then the motorcade proceeded down Houston and went down Elm, there were shots fired at President Kennedy. And was there a particular point in time that you heard any shots, or at what point did you know that something had happened?
You know, I was stopped in about midway of the block there on Houston while they were turning the corner.
Midway on Houston?
Yeah, I was sitting still.
And then did you speed up again and head for the hospital?
Not until the chief come on the radio and said, head for Parkland.
Head for Parkland. It's been 32 years, but is there any type of time frame from that point that you would have headed to the hospital?
From the time he said that?
From the time you stopped?
Oh, maybe a half a minute.
Half a minute? Okay.
Minute, something like that. Time enough, there was about 6 cars, I guess, had made the corner.
So your basic assignment was to ride with the motorcade, and then you proceeded on to Parkland Hospital.
Yeah.
And what did you do at Parkland Hospital?
Well, I helped get Miss Kennedy out of the car after we got out there. She didn't want to get out, so I finally got to help her get out and walked her on into the hospital. Then I turned around and come back outside and stood around until there was somewhere else for us to go.
I imagine it was mass confusion.
Well, I wound up escorting Johnson back out to the airport to go back to Washington.
When you arrived at Parkland, were you able to see President Kennedy or Governor Conway?
Yeah. Well, you couldn't tell a whole lot about Kennedy because she was laying across his head. But I didn't make no effort to look. They kept trying to get her to let them have him so they could take him on in. And I just reached over and caught her by the shoulders. So come on, let them take him on in. And got her out of the car, and I walked her on in the hospital.
And then after that, you just came back to police headquarters?
Yeah. And then whenever they finally decided that he was dead and that Johnson carried him back out to Air Force One, and he was sworn in out there as president.
And when we talked on the phone, you had some reservations about Lyndon Johnson, or did you feel that maybe there was some, that he had a dislike for the Kennedys, or is that something you said on the, no? Okay, all right.
I don't comment on that.
Okay, and then of course later, basically there wasn't any attention drawn to you until in the 70s, and you were contacted by the House Select Committee on Assassinations?
Well, yeah, first though they started looking for an scapegoat for that microphone. And they wanted to know where I was at. I told them where I was at. They said, that's a perfect spot.
Did you, when they contacted you, did they tell you everything they were interested in or what it was about? And
no.
No, they did not. Okay. Then you got a subpoena, or was it a summons to go to Washington?
It was just a summons.
It was a summons. But they, and they were questioning you about where you were at in the motorcade and if it could have been your microphone that was stuck open. Is that what they were doing? But they did not let you hear the...
No, I asked them if I could hear the tapes, and they said, no, you don't need to hear them. And they were questions they asked me could be answered as a possible. Mm-hmm. They could all be answered possible.
Possible. But what would you have told them if they would have allowed you to hear the dictabelt recording?
I'd tell them, hell no, it wasn't my radio.
And the reasons you would have given them for that are?
Because I could hear what was going on. And I also could tell that the microphone was on the three-wheeler, not on the solo.
And wasn't there something about sirens that would have been on that recording?
Well, according to the other, on the recording, it showed the sirens coming up and then going away.
They have a video from the motorcade procession that they said was you reaching down to turn on or switch on your microphone, and that's where they got the idea that they thought it was your stuck open microphone. Can we play a segment for you and you can let us know whether that is you or not. Why don't we play that and we can find out if that's you or not in the motorcade procession.
All right.
Sergeant McLain, we just would like you to look at this film of a motorcycle officer on Main Street approaching Houston and find out if this could be you.
Yeah, it could be.
Now the person is reaching down. Where was your microphone
He
switch?
wasn't reaching down. He just laid his hand across it. You can see his hand on the inside of his leg.
Okay. And the microphone would have been...
My microphone's up on the crossbars, on the handlebars, up on the right-hand side.
I see.
Okay, Mr. McLain, we just got through seeing the segment that showed what may be you reaching down, doing something on the motorcycle, and you say that that is, it couldn't be the microphone because your microphone was up on the handlebars.
That's right.
Okay, that's a good point that we wanted to establish. Okay, when you made the turn from Main Street onto Houston, in the Hughes film, and I believe that you were shown frames of that in the House Select Committee, you said that was you that was swinging wide around the corner and you could see Mayor Cavill's car in the background. You know what I'm talking about?
They're swinging around on to Houston, yeah.
Right. Now, how far down Houston Street did you go before you changed the pace of your motorcycle speed?
About midway of the block, and I stopped.
And what caused you to stop at that point?
Well, the traffic had slowed up because they was making their turn onto Elm Street. And there's no need me running up there and getting in that because they got to make their turn. And if they make their turn and take off, then I pull on up.
So it was customary that if the rest of the motorcade stopped, you would generally stop where you were
Right.
at in the motorcade.
Right.
Okay, now while you were stopped, did you notice anything?
Yeah.
Okay, did you notice anything pertinent to the assassination while you were stopped?
I heard one shot. I looked up, seen all that bunch of pigeons fly off behind that school book depository.
Did you notice anything else while you were stopped?
No. Well, I turned back around and seen Miss Kennedy up on the back of the limousine.
And you saw her over the wall, or how were you able to see her?
You can see through that. It's sort of like lettuce work, but you can see through it in places.
You're referring to the square ornamental holes that are in
Yeah.
the wall. And you could see Mrs. Kennedy
Yeah.
at that point?
About that time, the chief come on the radio and said, head for Parkland.
Okay, now as you discussed in your House Select Committee, you thought your microphone was set on channel 1.
I said it could possibly be.
Right, now, do you know what channel the chief broadcast that on?
Right now, no, I couldn't.
Okay, I think they determined in the House Select Committee that was on channel 2.
We had 1 and 2, and it's been a while.
Right. So if your microphone was on channel 1 and it was stuck on, as some people say, would you be able to hear him say that over your radio?
No, you couldn't hear anything. Maybe a lot of static.
Okay, now, when you did hear the chief say to go to the hospital, at that point, what did you do?
I took off, headed for Parkland
Okay, when did you turn your siren on?
immediately.
This is while you were on Houston Street?
Well, probably not, because it was foot operated, and you got to have speed for it to work. And I imagine it was after I got on Elm Street where I could get a little speed to make it make a noise.
Now, when you reached the triple underpass, do you think that you had your siren on at that point?
I know I did.
Okay, and then was there any cars on the ramp or any confusion on the ramp that would have blocked your way as you were trying to catch
No,
up?
because they had all that blocked off because that's the way the procession was going to go.
And you caught up, I believe you said in your House Select testimony that you caught up with the motorcade at the Hyatt House or the Continental Street?
Right along in there, yes.
Okay, now were the other motorcycles sirens operating?
Yeah.
Okay, their sirens were going and your sirens were going?
Right.
And then did your siren continue all the way to Parkland Hospital?
Yep. It was louder at points. Whenever we had to slow up to make a turn or something or other, it would get quieter because you can't keep it going while you're turning.
How long do you think it took you to get to Parkland Hospital from, say, the triple underpass?
Let's say a minute and a half,
Okay.
maybe 2 minutes.
The sounds that would be recorded on a stuck microphone that would be different from what you call a solo motorcycle or a three-wheeler?
Well, whatever sound is on the three-wheeler, it's real what you'd say, loose, chattery like. And on the solo, it just hits a solid lick. The three-wheeler sounded like a thrashing machine.
Is there any doubt in your mind that perhaps there was more to it than just Lee Harvey Oswald, or how do you feel? As an investigative officer, I ask all the law enforcement officers that I've interviewed how they feel as far as how the evidence went down, and do they feel that, you know, with Oswald's activities in Russia and different things he was able to do, and the physical evidence, is there anything that you question or that you're wondering about?
Yeah, I question about him being the only one involved, because I've done a little hunting of my own, and I've never shot anything that went away from me and then come back to me. Usually they hit the ground rolling if they're running, or they just fall. But on these films I've seen, it shows his head going away from the school book depository and then coming right back. I feel like that there's somebody over on that railroad track shot him the second time.
One of the things they did put into the evidence was a bullet that had went through Kennedy and hit Governor Connally, and it caused a total of 7 wounds, and it lost less than 2 grains of lead. How do you feel about that?
Is that one that done all that zigzagging?
Yeah. Well, I know bullets do strange things, but the point is a bullet out of the box weighed 161 grains, and the one they
But
found...
if it hits something other to ricochet, it's gonna batter that bullet. And the way I understand it, that was a perfect bullet.
The tip of it was, yes. The base of it was flattened slightly.
Do you have any evidence that the bullet did zig around? I mean, do you know anything?
No, I don't. I didn't have nothing to do with the investigation part
You just
of it.
know
All
what
I've
you've
done
heard.
was escort it, and what I've seen on these all different various tapes.
So you have no particular knowledge of the path of the bullet,
No.
other than what the general public has seen?
Well, thank you very much, Sergeant McLain. We really appreciate your time and
All
effort, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That was very good. That was very good on those.
And what you did to Martin, oh, someday you're gonna pay. And I'll stand in the broad daylight, shout your name.
We're here with Mr. Ronald B. Fisher, and I'd certainly like to thank you for taking the time to do this interview. And Mr. Fisher, you were a resident of Dallas in 1963?
Well, actually a resident of Mesquite, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas.
And where did you work at in 1963?
The Dallas County Auditor's Office, 407 Records Building, downtown Dallas.
And in November of 1963, of course, you knew that President Kennedy was going to come to visit Dallas?
Yes.
And when you found out that he was coming to Dallas, did you know a specific route that he was going to take, or were you aware of what type of route he was going to take downtown? Or
It seems to me that I recall a newspaper article a day or two before his arrival that showed the route of the motorcade, but I'm not sure about that. It seems like I did know.
According to your Warren Commission testimony, your boss let you and your friend Mr. Edwards off early?
Yes.
To go out and watch the president?
Watch the parade. Mm-hmm.
And when you decided to watch President Kennedy's motorcade route, where did you stand at or take a position at?
Well, the final location where we were going to view the motorcade from was the southwest corner of Elm and Houston, directly across the street from the Texas School Book Depository.
And is that where you stayed during the motorcade route, or did you move at any time?
Well, after the shots rang out, Bob and I ran west down Elm Street to approximately the area directly across the street from where the young man and his wife, the Newmans, I believe you call them, and their 2 children were laying on the ground, and at that point we crossed Elm Street toward the grassy knoll and toward the couple that was on the ground. They were picking themselves up off the ground when we got to them. And Bob or I once said, "What happened?" And the woman was hysterical and crying, and I believe the children were crying. They were very small. But anyway, the man was visually upset, but he did say they've shot the president. And Bob and I didn't believe him.
Did you see President Kennedy go down Houston Street and then make the left turn on Elm before you were aware of any shots? Did you see
Yes.
that part of it?
Yes.
And prior to the shots, did you look at the Texas School Book Depository building?
Bob was the one who called my attention to this man that was sitting in the window, the 5th or 6th floor, I don't remember which, but he called my attention to it, and I don't know why he did, but I looked up at the man when he called my attention to him, and I stared at him for a little while because of the fact that he seemed not to be looking for the parade, but rather sitting transfixed and staring, very still, and looking toward the triple underpass, rather than through the parade route, or to the parade route, which was going to be coming down to his left. I thought it was a little unusual, and everybody was milling around and talking and laughing and carrying on and whatnot, and this man seemed to be very still and transfixed. I just thought it was unusual.
Did you notice anybody else in the windows? Did that kind of catch your attention or anything? Or?
It seems to me that on a lower floor, maybe the floor directly below the 5th or 6th floor, I'm not sure. It seems like there were 2 or 3 colored fellows, but I'm not sure about that. It seems like at some point before the parade, there was somebody in one of the other windows, but I'm not sure.
And this window that you saw, the person that seemed to be transfixed, staring in another direction, did the window appear to you to be like half open, or?
I think the window was fully open.
Fully open at that time. And you did say he seemed to be transfixed. I think you said something about he never moved his head and he never seemed to move anything, just was there transfixed.
Yes.
So, and I think later in your testimony, you also said that you couldn't see, or you did not notice if he had been holding anything, or is that true?
I never saw his hands, and I never saw if he was holding anything. I could see from about the middle of his chest up past the top of his head, but I never saw another instrument in the window. I could see some cases behind him, or what appeared to be boxes of some sort.
When the shots occurred, was there, to your best recollection, was there any definition as to whether the first one might have been closer than the second, or did it seem like an even space that the shots occurred?
I don't recall. I really don't recall.
Do you recall how many shots you thought you might have heard?
I originally said in my deposition in the sheriff's office that there were 4 shots, and there were a number of people who had claimed that they heard 4 shots. However, I began to question that because I just simply could not remember exactly how many shots there were. It's like trying to remember if there was 8 or 9. You know, it's a little easier with 3 or 4, but it becomes more difficult with 8 or 9, and even still more difficult with 19 or 20. So I don't know if there were 3 or 4 shots. I thought there was 4, and I had explained that to the investigator, Mr. Boleyn. I still think that there were probably 4 shots, but I couldn't swear to it.
And did you give an opinion as to what direction they might have came from?
No.
Okay. And then in your testimony, I believe you were trying to say, or were asked, the description of the person you saw in the window.
Yes.
And I think you were kind of giving the impression that the person might have had more of a darker color hair than lighter color. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I believe you did say that, I guess after the shots occurred, you never did look back at the window.
No, I did not. Well, actually, before the shots occurred, when the motorcade came around the corner from Main Street and turned onto Houston, I stopped looking at the man then and directed my attention the opposite direction.
Quite naturally so, yes. And you did say in your testimony that after the first shot you thought it was a firecracker.
I did.
And then when you were asked in your Warren Commission testimony, where did the shots appear to be coming from? You said they appeared to be coming from just west of the school book depository. There were some railroad tracks and there were some railroad cars there.
I was just guessing. The sound bounces around in that part of town, and I don't know that anyone has ever fired a rifle in that part of town before, and I certainly wasn't there if they did, so I was strictly speculating on that.
And then in your testimony, you said you ran up to the top of the hill there where all the Secret Service men had run thinking that the bullets had come from, and they seemed to be searching that area. They jumped off their cars and ran up the side of the hill there and onto the tracks where the passenger freight cars were. Did you actually see people jump off their cars?
No, I did not.
Okay.
And I didn't see anything about...
Perhaps, I think there were some newspaper reporters that had jumped off their cars, cameramen. Could that have been...
There were some officials that were at the top of the grassy knoll. But as far as looking past that fence there into that railroad yard, I did not. I didn't even get that far. When Bob and I ran up the grassy knoll toward the fence area, there were officials already there, and I believe there was a Dallas police officer there. There was a uniformed officer there. And somebody in that group said, "Don't come up here." And so we went on back down the hill where the Newmans were.
I see.
And then eventually crossed Elm Street and went back to work. There were a lot of people up at the top of the grassy knoll. There were a number of people, and I believe one of them was a uniformed Dallas police officer.
The reason I asked that is there were 3 policemen, well actually 2 policemen and 1 deputy constable that told the Warren Commission that within 10 minutes of the shooting that they were either shown or told that they were in the presence of Secret Service. And they testified that to the Warren Commission. One of them's in the video I gave you, Sergeant Harkness. And then the House Select Committee determined that all the Secret Service men had stayed with the motorcade and had gone to the hospital, and only one had come back about 30 to 40 minutes after the shooting. So the question was, and it was even written up in the newspaper, who were these men that these policemen reported were Secret Service.
I had heard that story.
So that's three policemen that at the time had no reason to lie. I mean, to me, it just appears that if you were running into detectives or FBI agents, you would say that. That's what I thought was interesting. Yeah. And then when you were testifying and Mr. David Bellin was taking your testimony, did he, I believe you said that he became upset because you were honestly and openly just saying what you thought the man's hair and his description. And isn't that true? He was kind of upset, or?
Oh, he was very upset, not just kind of upset. The deposition does not indicate any pause in the deposition. There was, however, at least one pause, and maybe several, but I do remember at least one occasion where he became so upset that he told the stenographer to stop, and he abruptly got up and left the room for some time. And the stenographer and I sat there in the room waiting for him to come back. After some period of time, 5, 10, 15 minutes, he came back, seemed to have collected himself, was very calm, sat down behind his desk, and began the deposition again. Now, the deposition does not indicate this pause, or any of these pauses, if there was more than one, and there may have been more than one. He took issue with me over the number of gunshot wounds, or the number of gunshots rather, and the color of the man's hair. At the time, I did not understand why he was so upset about it, and I think I understand it now, but then I did not.
Well, in later years, there was a newspaper article, which is how I thought about you more, that I believe Earl Goals wrote, I may be mistaken, and it was in the 70s, and he wrote that that you had said that he, meaning David Bellin, and I almost got into a fight over the color of the man's hair. And I thought that was kind of interesting that you were there and David Bellin was not, and you're trying to give your testimony and you're saying that he was unhappy with the way that you were describing the person.
Very unhappy.
So and I believe also you said at one point in time that a deputy from the deputy sheriff's office came up and asked you if you were Ronald Fisher, and
yes,
and you said yes, and
that was the day of the assassination.
And he said that Sheriff Decker wanted to see you.
I'm not sure if he said Sheriff Decker wants to see me. He said he might have said you're wanted in the sheriff's office, and this is where I don't know, a dozen or so people had been collected who were witnesses. The Newmans, for instance, were there. When I got down there, they still had their children with them. Sometime later on in the afternoon, someone came and got the children, but they more or less locked us up in there. There was also a gentleman in the sheriff's office who had a movie camera. And I don't know if that was Mr. Zapruder or not, but there was someone in there who had a movie camera, and the news media was standing outside the office area there, and the office was covered on at least one side by glass, and they were making bids on his camera and putting it up to the window, writing it on a piece of paper, putting it up to the window, and he would shake his head, and then they would up the ante, and then they would put it back up on the window, and he would shake his head again, and then someone came into Sheriff Decker's office and took his camera from him. So that settled that. I don't know if he ever got his camera back or not. And I don't remember if it was a still camera movie. I don't remember.
They came in and took it from him.
Oh yeah, they came in and got it. Somebody discovered that apparently that he thought at least he had some pictures of something. And outside of Mr. Decker's office, or Sheriff Decker's office, there were a number of newsmen, NBC, CBS, ABC, I don't know who all they were, but they had camera crews.
Someone from CBS was trying to bid on the film, and I think they only offered him like $50,000, and he
well,
just
I never
laughed.
did see the amounts because I was sitting on the other side of the room. The officer, the motorcycle officer, who was at the left rear of the presidential limousine, was also there. The one that was splattered. He was there for some time. I remember seeing him because they told him not to take his uniform off, not to wash his uniform. So he said he told this person that he was uncomfortable with wearing it, and they said, well...
This is the officer?
This is the police officer.
Probably was Bobby Hargis, the guy
Might
in
have
your
been.
video.
Anyway, they instructed him, no, it didn't make any difference whether he was uncomfortable or not, he should keep it on.
Because there were two, Hargis and B.J. Martin both testified that they got hit with.
Yeah.
And just going back to when you saw the man in the window, what if you could approximate a time as to relationship to when Kennedy came by? Do you know about what time that would have been?
Well, it was just a few minutes before the motorcade came by, because I was staring at the figure in the window when the motorcade came off of Main Street and turned onto Houston. So it would have been just moments before the motorcade came by.
And you didn't, see anything. It's been purported that Oswald shot from that window, but you did not see anything in his hands or
no, I did
anything.
not. Never saw the man move.
Never saw the man move.
Never saw his hands.
You you were there, and going to the source is the very best thing you can do when you're doing any type of investigative work. Firsthand information is the best. After what you saw and heard that day, and maybe the revelations that might have taken place since then with different investigative bodies, do you feel, as a personal opinion, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, or that there were more involved and possibly there might have been a wider spread conspiracy?
Well, I think that there was a wider spread conspiracy, and Oswald was undoubtedly part of the conspiracy, but I suspect that he didn't know it. I think it's just like he said in the hallway of the Dallas Police Department, City Hall down there, was that he was a patsy. They had him set up for this, I think. That's just my personal opinion. There were a lot of other people involved in this. It's always curious to note political assassinations, to me anyway, If you really want to kill someone, you triangulate the fire with a rifle. Now, and that appears to have been what has happened here. And there's the result, as anyone can see, is pretty conclusive. It's difficult to imagine that even if you assume that there were only 3 shots, how one man could have fired 3 shots, one being completely and totally fatal. I don't know. It's just a feeling that I have. I don't think Oswald knew what was going on until the shooting started, and then I think he knew what was happening then and knew he was in trouble, even though he didn't have anything to do with it. That's why he fled the Oak Cliff, killed Officer Tippett, and so on. Everything seemed to be fine with Oswald until he met Tippett. Mm-hmm. He was calm. People noticed he was walking down the street.
He gave a lady his cab, let her go first.
He went to his apartment, got his gun, his pistol, assuming he didn't have it beforehand, and I don't think he did. Got his pistol, walking down the street, Officer Tippett stops him, he shoots Tippett, suddenly he's in a panic. Why now? He's just shot a policeman, yes, but supposedly just before that he'd shot the President of the United States and he was calm.
Hmm?
Doesn't make sense.
When the policeman, Marion Baker, met him on the first floor, or second floor, he pulled his gun on Oswald, and Oswald was looking right down the barrel, and of course the manager vouched for him, but the officer later testified that he was not sweating or shocked or jumped or was just as cool as a cucumber, and supposedly was drinking a Coke. And later the testimony was, there was an addendum to it to say that he hadn't yet purchased a Coke, but you know, that kind of added on to the time frame of him getting downstairs. Mm-hmm. When you gave your Warren Commission testimony, you did say that your friend Bob Edwards was asked if he wanted to come back and authorize it or sign it.
Yes, his deposition, as per the Warren Commission report, shows that Mr. Boleyn offered to have the deposition typed up and have him review it and correct it and sign it if he so desired. But Mr. Boleyn also told him, as my understanding in Bob Edwards' deposition, that he could waive that if he wished. Bob chose to waive it because he said he did not want to come back. I was never given the option one way or the other. In fact, it was never mentioned to me about either looking at the deposition afterwards, making any correction. None of that was ever mentioned at the end of my deposition. I don't know. That's the way Mr. Boleyn handled the whole thing. In retrospect, I very much question Mr. Boleyn's either his ability or his charge from the Warren Commission. I don't know what axe he was grinding at the time, but I suspected that they had the solution to the assassination figured out before they had the previous facts, and so they had to make the previous facts fit the solution of the situation. When you look at it in that respect, then a lot of the attitude that Mr. Boleyn showed me makes sense. But it's difficult to imagine another situation that would have caused Mr. Boleyn to act the way he did, barring that particular scenario. So I don't know. At the time I was 24, 25 years of age, and this man was an official. He was hired by the federal government to do this investigation, and I was respectful of it, and if he wanted to get mad, then I sat there and let him get mad.
Which he did.
Which he did, and eventually left the room. He was so mad, at least on one occasion, if not several. Looking back on it now, I probably would have insisted on signing the deposition or making sure that the stenographer noted that he became extremely angry. I never did. That was extremely puzzling to me at the time. I could not understand. I thought the man felt bad or something. I couldn't figure out why. He seemed to be so upset with me. I was being as helpful as I could, and I certainly wasn't mad at him.
You could speak to Mr. Boleyn and could ask him a question. Is there anything that you would like to say to him, or?
Not really. I have listened to several speeches that Mr. Boleyn has given to various organizations in recent years, and I have about as little respect for him now as I probably should have had for him when he took my deposition. I just don't care for the man, and I'm sure he had a job to do. I just don't think that that he probably should have accepted the charge to take the depositions. If you're going to do a job, then I've always thought that you ought to do the best you can with it. And I suspect that Mr. McLain knew that he was not going to do his best.
Mr. Fisher, thank you again for your time, and I appreciate it very much, and I think you'll enjoy this video when it comes out.
Pass this on to the CID to see if we can pick this man up. Charles Douglas Givens, G-I-V-E-N-S. He's a colored male, 37, 6'3", 165 pounds. He has an ID number in the Sheriff's Department, 37954. He's a porter that worked on this floor up here. He has a police record, and he left. 492.16.
Okay, and according to your Warren Commission testimony, you saw where a shot had hit the turf on the south side of Elm Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you said that the shot had caught the manhole cover at the corner?
The concrete of the manhole cover, yes, sir.
Okay.
J. Edgar, the more I know about the secrets and lies we were never told. The madder I get, that no one could tell you no. You had the power, they shook when they heard your name. Too much power, no one could take away. And we all paid the price, oh yeah, from your sick little game. So I'll stand in the broad daylight and I'll shout your name in vain. How could you do that to Bobby and JFK? You took freedom and you threw it right away. And what you did to Martin, oh, someday you're gonna pay. And I'll stand in the broad daylight, shout your name in vain, oh. You did to Martin, someday you'll pay. You had the power, they shook when they heard your name. Too much power, no one could take away. We all paid the price, oh yeah, from your sick little game.